Welcome, Viper pilots, back to Just Plain Crazy. I'm Brendan. Thanks again for joining me again on my channel, and welcome down here to the lair. Do you love the Eflite Viper? I bet you do. Do you hate the way it bounces when it lands? I bet you do. Do you hate the bent nose wheel? I definitely did. I got myself a set of sprung landing gear from rccastle.com. RC Castle carries Eflite gear. Prior to them coming out with this gear, we got version 2 Avanti gear and put it into our planes. That's become really hard to find, so now it's time to experiment with something new. I got my hands on it, and I'm going to share it with you guys right now. Go through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we're going to check this thing out. So what do I have here behind me? Wah! It's the Eflite Viper sandwich. I already did the landing upgrade to mine, so a good flying buddy of mine, Dave, has donated his Viper to me, and we're going to hack into this thing and upgrade his landing gear. So let's go ahead and get this thing down, and let's talk about some stuff. So we're going to flip this off of here, and we are going to turn that around. So let's discuss, first off, version 2 Avanti gear. The version 2 Avanti gear holds up really well over the stock landing gear. The stock landing gear issues aren't really with the mains, it's more of the nose wheel. But when you upgrade the nose wheel, you upgrade it all. And one of the things that you have to do, not a huge deal, is you have to cut out the wheel well openings to allow for a little bit longer gear. Gets the plane off the ground a little bit more. It sits a little higher. And then you have to trim the openings here and around the sides, obviously taking this plastic shield off and doing some modifications in here in order to get this gear to fit. But it's a great upgrade. The problem is with this gear, when you come in to land, this isn't a real Flare Authority plane. You can get it to flare, and there's a lot of people, and I know some of you are out there right now sharpening the pitchforks, and you're going, just land on the mains all the time. I never have a problem with the gear. The problem with the gear, when we flip this out, is this pigtail, where it goes down into the retract right there, will start to bend. This doesn't necessarily come from bad landings. This comes from takeoffs on rough terrain. When you're bouncing that nose wheel at 30, 40 miles an hour, whatever it's taken to get this thing to rotate and get off the ground, that nose gear is bouncing around and it bends it. When it bends it, it starts to not retract back in far enough. It turns to the left, turns to the right, and it doesn't give you the steering authority one way or the other on the ground. Again, the mains hold up very well. Not a big issue here, but it's more here. And again, I'm not a perfect pilot. I don't land perfect every time. I don't just set it down on the mains and drop the nose. It's not that easy for me. Hey, sometimes I go to the field, it's like I've never even flown before. They're so bad. Just being honest, we have our good days and our bad days. This new set of landing gear comes from rc-castle.com. You can get the gear for roughly $30 plus whatever shipping options they have available for you at the time. And there's two different options. You can find them in the description below. One is going to have an afterburner kit with it, and one is just the landing gear option. Either way, they're priced really, really good. Stick around for the next video. I got something special for you guys. Hint, hint. But anyway, getting back to this Viper gear, let's go ahead and crack this stuff open and see what we get inside the packaging. We're going to weigh it, give you some of those numbers, and we're going to start walking through the install and see what we have to do. So, two different options that we have when we order these. You can get just the gear, or you can get it as a package with the gear and the afterburner, or what they term as a Centerburner on their webpage. I'm going to crack it open right here in front of you guys, and we're going to see what we get. Again, a lot of people, they go with low bounce tires and foam tires and everything else. That's fine if that's what you want to do. This is just another option. So you have your front gear. Got side external springs on it. Looks like we have 3 grub screws on the side. There's no center pivot post. And then we have it looks like, so we're going to have our two, I guess this one is going to be, as we look at it, this one's going to be our main in the front, a spring on each side there for the nose wheel, and these are going to be our mains, one on each side. Kind of bizarre here that all right, pilots, here's the cutaway and the stoppage of the last segment. As I was looking at this, there was something that didn't add up to me, and one of the things that I always want to do is to be crystal clear, honest with my reviews, and upfront with any of the products that I check out. I don't want to mislead anybody or misconstrue anything. And I noticed something that didn't make sense to me. So I reached out to RC Castle and I asked them a question. I got a response back overnight, literally. They answered my question. I'm going to show you what it is, and we're going to move on with this project. On this gear, if you may have noticed it in the cutaway before, you have an axle here on both sides. That's obviously your nose wheel. And you'll notice the nose wheel has a spring on both sides, okay? This one here on my mains, I have my right side and my left side, so these are going to sit this way and this way on the plane. I have two springs here and one spring there. So initially I thought, well, maybe they forgot the gear spring on there and there should be another one and I got a mismade product. I do have a mismade product, but I actually have an extra spring here that needs to come off. So we're going to literally just take a screwdriver to this thing and we are going to unthread the screw and spring and take it off. And maybe this is a good thing because I have an extra now in case I should lose one on any of the other portions. Not a big deal. And here was the explanation I got. This thing has to close into the wheel well this way, right? So if there's a spring on there, then you don't have the clearance and it's going to hit right on top of that retract. So it does make sense to me. The other thing that I wasn't ecstatic about is it doesn't have directions. You really have, if you are a complete novice to figuring this stuff out, and there's nothing wrong with that, there is no directions on what to do to cut any of this stuff. It is very clear on their website. They do include nice pictures, and it's just a suggestion I'll pass on to them is just to print something and send it along. But you want to trim 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters. You want to trim all these axles, measure up that 2 centimeters, and then cut them off. So what I actually did is I used a measuring rod, just a piece of regular steel, and I am going to go ahead and put that next to them, and I am going to mark them for cutting. So literally I will take my Sharpie now as we do this. I will go ahead and mark these just like this, and I am going to cut those with literally a pair of bolt cutters. I'm not going to use cutters or anything else that are going to make hot sparks. They melt right through foam, hard to control. I'm literally going to use a pair of bolt cutters, and we're going to see how this goes as I try it out. So here is the next one. I'm going to line these up right there. And the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to take those main gear and I'm going to make sure that this thing fits down in there and see what it looks like. So that's the end I was using. And you can see there's actually more on my mark right there at 2 centimeters. This thing will actually go deeper than that. So at 2 centimeters, this thing isn't fully bottomed out. It looks like if you wanted to actually cut those a little bit longer, you could go ahead and do that. I'm going to go with their recommendation at 2 centimeters and we'll see what happens. But you can see there, how far that 2 centimeters would stick into the body. If you want to go longer, you can measure that out. If I had to guess, that's probably right around 25 millimeters if I were to rough guesstimate. But here is the other thing that I want to see now that those are marked. Let's go ahead and measure the weight on these, because I know that people will ask. We will go ahead and throw that on as grams. 1 gear, 2 gear, 3 gear. So you're at 64 grams of weight. And we will go ahead, and I'm just going to I'll actually just write it here on the bench. 64 grams. And then we'll measure what we cut off with those tires. Now keep in mind, these are some nice light foamy tires. They're compressible compared to these hard rubber ones. So you guys that just want lighter tires, you can get that here too. Let me flip the retract switch here. Had to reinitialize the plane there, so that's done. Let me flip this retract switch, and let's actually take a look at one of these gear. So with that thing in there and my mark, if we cut that and this thing sits in there, you guys can see where this thing sits in that wheel well. That looks to me to be fairly nice, sitting right in the inside. The one thing that I will note is that those wheels seem to be a tad bit smaller, maybe half an inch smaller, but it looks like maybe actually you will sit the same distance off the ground because the strut's longer, if you know what I'm getting at there. But anyway, I think we'll be good for cut number 1. So let's go ahead and get those back up. So hopefully this works out and Dave doesn't get mad, right? So I am going to go ahead and put the bolt cutters right there on the money. And that thing popped right off. That looks like a fairly clean cut. And we will back out those grub screws or set screws. That thing slides right over. Seems to be pretty decent. And I guess if you had to space these out, you could with either a washer, or you can just lift them up if you wanted to a little bit. I'm going to use a better tool here. So let's just see how those look when you close. Now, I don't know if it gets much easier than that, guys, to install these. So that's where they sit in the wheel well. They seem to sit a little bit towards the rear pocket, but I like the way they feel. The springs are in there. It seems like nice and tight. Maybe it would be a good idea to put a little Loctite on those, but you can thread them things in. It looks like a good bit. I don't think they're going to go anywhere because there's tension on there. But one thing I will do that I will show you is I'm actually going to file flat spots where those set screws sit. And there are 3, one on each side. So now that I know that that distance is right, I'm going to go ahead and take a file to that. And we know that the one set screws right in the front and that these 2 are on the sides. The next step, I'm going to use my driver instead of an Allen wrench just because of the proximity. And I'm going to take all these grub screws and I am going to apply just the smallest amount of Loctite on them. I like this thing that's just a little roll up, and you can use this to just dab a little bit on there. And we're going to run these grub screws in. I have all of the flat spots made. Again, something to keep in mind, Loctite will eat foam and plastic, so you don't want to get it on things. That's why I don't like the fluidy stuff, the liquidy stuff, because if you put too much on it, it runs into something, you will ruin it. So this I can control and just dab in just what I want, just a little bit on there. And we will run this in to each one of those spots. So both the mains will get running like this, and we're going to cut away to the time lapse, and then we'll finish this up and get to the front. Literally, guys, if you didn't have to video to explain this stuff, these could literally be a 5-minute modification to your plane. So those look like they fit in there really nice. They are now Loctited in and ready to go. And now when it comes down to this nose gear, we're going to have to figure out here what we're going to do there. So this thing travels a little bit, and I think we're going to give it that continued room to do that, because when it pulls out, it's actually longer, and this thing's going to sit right on top of here, so we need to be 30 above that spot. So I am going right on top of the steering column with that steering collar. I'm going to go right on top there with my stick. That is 2 centimeters, and we are going to hack that nose wheel off. Here we go. Again, Dave, don't be mad. No, it's gone, it's gone, no. So what do these things weigh now? Let's check these out. One wheel, 2 wheels, 3 wheels. So we are at 43 grams in our math. So in order to add the spring gear, you are adding 21 grams of weight, which, if I'm remembering right off the top of my head, that is less than an ounce of weight. I think that's a nice upgrade. So let's go ahead and file this off, and let's get our nose wheel mounted on here. I want to see how we do with clearance on the sides of this, and see if we're going to have to trim or shave anything off. So time lapse. One of the things that I can tell you about this upgrade is I really do recommend doing this upgrade to your Viper to that front nose wheel before it starts to bend. Once that wire is tweaked a little bit, it causes issues with the gear retracting in, and you'll see it. It doesn't want to pull the gear in all the way. It then becomes tough to make anything fit right in there. And I was able to get this nose wheel to fit in there with just a little bit of trimming. I just trimmed, because of the springs, just a little bit off here, and just a little bit off there, and down into the inside of the foam there. You could see that we just chiseled just a little bit out, maybe 1/8 of an inch down in there. But one of the things about the Viper that makes this tough, when this wire support in here bends, the swivel arm that slides up and down on that U-shaped bracket there doesn't work right. And it makes it hard, because any gear doesn't want to sit right as it goes inside. It wants to pivot and kind of bind itself. So I do recommend this before you wind up bending the initial wire. It's a great upgrade right from the gate. Afterwards, if you're going to do it after the fact, after you have problems, I probably recommend that you go ahead and replace this wire or take it apart and straighten it, but there is a C-clip on that wire way down inside the retract, which means it all needs to come apart to really get in there. It's really, really difficult. But otherwise, the upgrade in itself, to trim this out for security purposes, to put this on and cut the wires, you're probably talking, guys, you're probably talking a total of 10 minutes. Not a big deal. So what we're going to do is I got the Loctite on there. I got my set screws. I'm going to take this thing out into the paved driveway and basically just give it a quick runaround test to make sure that we're centered here, and I think we're ready to take this thing to the field. So again, landing gear upgrade for the Viper. There's a couple different things that go on with the Viper. It is an incredible flying plane from Eflite, one of the best first EDFs. I have a lot of EDFs and I still enjoy flying this plane. The landing gear is definitely in the nose problematic, as well as the cracking in the wings. Another thing, RC Castle has a solution for mid 30 bucks. Pick your shipping options. Again, the link is below. If you want it with one of these cool Centerburner assemblies in there, got another video coming up for you guys. Maybe a sweepstakes, give this thing away. So join me again soon. Let's get out to the field. So Pilot Dave is going to take up the Eflite Viper with the new upgraded gear from RC Castle. Again, the installation was fairly straightforward and easy. Straight up recommendation is to upgrade the gear before you bend that nose shaft. I think it'll make it a lot easier for setting up the steering. And our field here, it's kind of dry. It's been dry in Pennsylvania now for a while, so the grass is pretty much, well, non-existent. It's not thick. It is fairly short. The wheels are a tad bit smaller than the OE wheels, but I still think this thing is a great grass plane, and it'll get off the ground here even when this stuff starts to grow in with no problem. We will taxi this thing out and we'll see how it goes. No problem on the rollout. Gear up, flaps up. Flaps down, gear down. And this really becomes one of the benefits to it, is the durability of the gear. We'll go ahead and land it here, see how the gear holds up. Nice smooth landing and rollout. Looks good. Let's see if we can get another one. We'll try and get one more on this pack. Takeoff and landing. Pilot Dave says he thinks it's definitely softer on the landing, so we'll see. Gear up, flaps up. We'll catch you on the landing. All right, gear down, flaps down. Little bounce.
Definitely it's softer on the landings.
So Dave said if you didn't hear him, he just thinks it's softer on the landings. And you can see as he taxis back, the field here isn't perfectly smooth. I mean, it's got good grass, dead grass, live grass. And it looks fairly smooth coming back. So if you can't find, you know, other gear and Avanti gear, and you don't want to upgrade to soft tires for the money, they're around 30 bucks from RC Castle. I think this is, it's a cool upgrade. Again, you know, before you get that nose wheel all bent up there with the shaft, I recommend that you go ahead and replace that as an upgrade right out of the gate. But it's kind of hard to beat this plane, and for a couple small upgrades, I think, you know, I think it would be well worth it and make this thing an amazing plane. So we'll catch you guys.